الرحمن الرحيم.
Peace and blessing, everybody. So a few people have asked me to make videos to get to know me, and I wanted to start with that one question that most everybody asks, which is, why did I choose Islam? There are two people who usually ask me this question, or two kinds of people, I should say. The first kind is non-Muslims. They'll ask me because they've heard all kinds of very negative things about Islam, and they're wondering why I would choose a religion that's usually portrayed as violent and violent and oppressive to women. And then on the other side, there's the Muslims who want to hear me talk about how Islam changed my life, and they're looking for a coming of age story. Let me start with the very first group of people. So as far as Islam goes, it is not as depicted in the media. It's not an actually violent religion. If you're looking at our sacred text itself, the Quran, in the Quran, every single chapter but one starts with, "In the name of God, most merciful, most compassionate." Those are very good traits, interesting traits to be promoting, and they are very promoted throughout the Quran, which is mercy and compassion on others. And of course, God's mercy and compassion is the greatest, but we're asked to show mercy and compassion in our daily lives as well. So as far as the Quran itself and what it teaches, it does teach to be compassionate to one another. And it's interesting to see how many people misuse it, and that's unfortunate, but it is a reflection on them rather than on our religion. Of course, there's going to be people everywhere who misuse either sacred text or even the law, or they'll misuse just do words out of your mouth. The reality is people everywhere twist things in certain ways to misuse them, and that's just a reflection of them as bad people rather than the religion as bad. So I hope that that explains the whole "I don't believe that my religion is violent" aspects of this conversation. Now, on the other side, there's also, like I said, the Muslims who want to hear like my coming of age story, like how Islam came and changed my life. Well, the reality is, other than wearing a headscarf, not a whole lot has changed. I'm the same person I was before. I'm just as loud and as sarcastic and as inappropriate as I used to be, but I wear a headscarf doing it, I guess. It's very much just who I am, and Islam kind of just fit the life that I was already living. And so it's one of the things I like to tell people. I did not so much choose Islam as much as it chose me. And I think that you have to understand a little bit of my background to understand that, but I hope that everybody out there have understood at least the very basic thing, which is I believe in an Islam that promotes peace, and that I'm still the same person that I was before my conversion. So those are the two big things that I want to answer right off the bat. As far as how Islam chose me, I've been lucky enough to have been raised in a family where spirituality was very much a topic of discussion and a topic of questioning. So as much as my parents, yes, they were religious, we were also welcome to question our religious teaching and to try and find answers. Both my parents have raised me to be a very inquisitive person, and I think that part of my questioning is why I directed myself towards Islam. It was kind of an accident in many, many ways, but yeah, so raised as a very, not strict Catholic, but very practicing Catholic. I've learned, I did Bible study, I did a lot of that education, but one of the things that I started questioning right off the bat when I was about, I think, 7 or 8 years old, I asked my mother, why do we say the Our Father, which is the main prayer used by Catholic, and yet when we say the Apostles' Creed, which is another prayer used by the Catholic, we say that Jesus is the only Son. Now, I'm linguistically minded. A lot of people know that I'm actually a translator by career, by training, sorry. And so I've always had that inquisitive mind for words and questioning the words and wording and sentence and things like that. That's always been very fascinating to me. And so, like, right off the bat, that was my question. Like, why did Jesus himself, peace be upon him, teach us that God was everyone's father, yet our religion teaches us that Jesus is the Son of God and he's the only Son? I didn't really get the discrepancies, and some people have explained it to me, and I've of course listened, and I was very interested in their definition of it, but I always had more of this understanding of Jesus in my own mind, I guess, that he was more of a prophet. And this understanding came from before my knowledge of Islam. I mean, I'm from a small town in northern New Brunswick where we did not have much exposure to Islam at all until 9/11, and then even then, it seemed like a very distant fact. Like, we didn't have Muslims in my town, or at least not at the time, and so we had nobody to have an honest conversation with. Like, what is your religion? Like, what? All we saw was 2 towers broke, and that was part of their plan because it was part of God's religious law, wrath. I'm not really sure what was going on through their heads at the time, but at the time I was 14 years old, it just seemed like a big blur, and I didn't really understand what was going on. I didn't really understand Islam at all. Like, to me, they could have said, like, they did this because they were XYZ. It would not have mattered because I didn't understand it at all. It was very abstract concept. It was very foreign and very far from my personal situation at the time. However, I did have an interest in religions, in world religions, so I studied mythology, Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology. I've also studied paganism. I've studied various versions of Wiccanism and elementarism. Judaism I've touched very shortly on. As I said, I was raised as a very strict Catholic, so I did study Catholicism as well and other forms of Christianity. I've studied a little bit of Hinduism, but that's more in the recent years that I've actually been looking at some of the Eastern religion, I guess you would call them. And part of studying Eastern religion was studying Islam, and I feel like reading the Quran for myself. I read it I read the Yusuf Ali translation of it in English. I also read, now I can't remember the name of the translator for the French version I read, but no, I can't remember it by heart. I'll have to check and get back to you on this one. But yeah, there's a French translation which I've also read. And I did, of course, kind of a comparative reading French and English. I do not know Arabic, unfortunately, so I did not read the Arabic original. However, I did find a lot of resources online explaining me the meanings of certain words, especially for those most convoluted segments, which I kind of wasn't sure that I could believe this. Like, I mean, I have a predetermined understanding of God, and I've always had an understanding of God. And I think that no matter which religion I would choose to follow, which doctrine I would wind up following, I'd always believe in God. That's kind of or even if I didn't follow any, I'd always believe in God, or at least a higher power. So, in my understanding of what God or that higher power would be, in reading the Quran, there were a few sentences where I went, is that possible? Really? The compassionate God in which I believe, the good God in which I believe, would he really send that kind of message? And then, of course, I researched and I saw that, oh, this translation actually said this, and that makes way more sense with what I know of from being good, or what I believe to be good. So, And some people will tell you, like, Islam is there to teach you a way of life, not to fit in with your way of life that you already have. That's true. However, the Quran also says by itself that there is no compulsion in religion, which means there's no forcing anyone into religion. And there's also another part in the Quran that says that basically God has put in our hearts the understanding of what goodness is, and it's up to you. It is up to each of us to live it to our full potential. And even those things that we're not sure about, that seems convoluted, that seems confusing, we have enough knowledge in our hearts that God has given us to find out an understanding. And of course, we're in the era of of the information era, so it's really easy for us to find all kinds of information. So I fully encourage people to look up things that seems to bother them within, like, whether it's around religion, science, morals, ethics, law. Look it up. You might be surprised to actually find what is the reasoning behind a certain law, what is the use of a certain verse, etc., etc. Like, and I'm not saying that every interpretation is correct, and it might not fit everybody, but at the end of the day, at least open the book and look it up for yourself, so that you can say that it's not somebody else's interpretation of things. It's very much your own. I think it's important for every human being to do this, and religion should not be a place of limitation. Like, it shouldn't be like you get to use your judgment on everything in life, but not on religion. I think part of faith is that you have to believe, and to believe you have to understand, and to understand you just have to find and seek answers to your questions. So that's a big part of that. So in short, I don't want to make this too long, but Islam has been just a very centralizing force to me. So a lot of the things that I've already believed are already questioned about my previous beliefs, or belief system, I should say. Islam answered, and it was just very interesting for me to find that peace and understanding within a religious text. Now, of course, not everybody will find the same peace within it, and some people will decide to take an entirely different approach to religion, and that's in a way their prerogative. However, I'd like to say that I strongly believe that your right to believe whatever you want begins and ends with yourself, which means if it affects somebody else, then it's wrong. So, and I mean affect somebody else, I would say, in a negative way. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying, but in short, yeah, that's the idea. I try to use my religion for good, which means, to me, charity, compassion, mercy, forgiveness, love, and the rest I try to keep personal to myself. Of course, there is an aspect of we are human and we are flawed, and I just hope that my flaws do not outweigh my strengths, including my religion, so including the religious aspect of my life. So I hope that my weakness in religion do not outweigh my strengths in my religion. So I hope that this answers your question about me and Islam. I will be making more videos, including why I wear my hijab. And of course, stay tuned for more videos. Please find me on Facebook. I have a Facebook now. It's www.facebook.com/lovegoddiversity. So look me up, like my page, and you'll see a lot more of the information coming up. Alright, thank you very much, and peace and blessing, everybody.